Hi guys, today we have advocate Kinnori Ghosh with us. She is a criminal lawyer by profession. She is a partner with RJ Legal Associates. So now we are going to start off with a rapid fire question. Are you ready, ma'am? And
I'm
welcome
scared. Thank you.
So I'll just read out a few questions. We would need your responses for that.
Sure.
Okay. So the first one. Introvert lawyer or extrovert lawyer, which survives longer in court?
Introvert lawyer.
Why?
You need to observe first and then speak. So that helps.
Okay, nice. Logic or intuition? What
Both.
wins cases?
Both.
Both? Right. Book smart criminal or street smart criminal?
Both. You need to learn and then be smart. Otherwise, you won't be able to survive. I always say to my fellow colleagues and interns, you need to unlearn what you learn in law school and relearn again. But you need to learn the basics of law also in the textbooks.
Okay, great. The next one is, if you were a criminal profiler, would you trust body language or words more?
Body language, always.
Okay, and why is it so?
Body language never lies. That's intuition. People will reveal what's there in their mind.
Okay, nice. So that's a projection you're looking at. Which personality trait do you think most criminals overuse? Charm or aggression?
Charm. 100% charm.
100% charm. Okay, so we have a catch here. All the charming people, be aware.
Not everybody is bad.
Right, okay. Now in a trial, would you rather face a calm psychopath or an impulsive criminal?
Impulsive criminal.
And
It's easy to win cases against them.
right, so you can,
It's very easy to ignite them and the truth will come out.
Okay, nice, interesting. If you had to pick a defense strategy, blame the mind or blame the society?
Very difficult one. Society I will not blame the might.
Okay. Okay, if your opposing lawyer was a personality type, would they be type A aggressive or type B kind of chill? Aggressive. So it's the same strategy. It's easier to understand the mind.
It's always, as a criminal lawyer or as a lawyer also, it's a strategy that we use, or I have learned from my seniors, to excite the other person, derail the argument and win the case. Everything is fair in war and love.
Okay, nice, interesting. Do you think lawyers secretly enjoy detective work?
Yes, I do at least. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm a very good detective.
Ah, nice. One personality trait every good lawyer must fake in court.
That they're horrible.
Oh, really? Do you feel that way sometimes? Like as a professional, you're very well established.
No, I still have a long journey to go. My inspirations are world-renowned lawyers of the world, like Mr. Hari Salve. I'm very fortunate to work with him in the Upahar fire tragedy case. It's the Ansel brothers, movie theatre which burned, and 59 lives were killed in 1997, 14 June if I'm not wrong. I did the matter pro bono. I've received a Lifetime Achievement Award for it. So Mr. Hari Salve, every lawyer would know, he's a renowned lawyer. I worked with him briefly on that matter.
Wow.
So yes.
That's great. If stress was a client, would you defend it or prosecute it?
Prosecute it.
And maybe know the reason.
Stress is not good for life. So it's better to put it behind bars.
And how do you take care of your mental health and your stress?
You need to tell yourself that it's part of your job. It's okay to be stressed because nothing is going to take it away, but it's a constant work in progress. You'll always have to keep telling yourself it's okay.
And with that, we come to the end of the rapid fire round, and Boshuga ma'am will be taking it forward. So thank you for watching and do continue listening to us.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Coffee and Conversation. As we promised, in each episode we will have someone whose struggle, experiences will leave us thinking deeply. So without wasting the time, let's dive into today's episode. Today we are having someone who is not only a fierce advocate to bring the justice, but also a warrior at heart. Welcome, Advocate Kinnori Ghosh. Welcome to Coffee and Conversation.
My pleasure.
Advocate Kinnori Ghosh, partner at RG Legal Associates. She is also a practicing lawyer at Supreme Court of India and Delhi High Court. Welcome to Coffee and Conversation. It's an honor to have you with us.
It's my pleasure too.
Advocate Ghosh, you are in one of the most difficult fields of law. What drew you in this field?
Actually, it's one of the easiest. Okay, people would like to differ, but the thing is that criminal law basically means your gut feeling, your resilience, and the ability to take the right decision at the right time. For example, civil law or arbitration law or commercial laws, I will all bracket it as civil law, and other like bodily offences and cheating as criminal law. Now, civil law is huge and vast. It's very difficult for a single person to master it in a very limited span of time. So with criminal law, but the areas are so constricted, and it's limited to the extent that if you take the right decision at the right time, you will be able to get relief for your client. And also there's a lot of adrenaline rush to this, and perhaps the CID episodes that aired on TV when I was a kid, and there was another episode that was aired when I was a child. It was called Ujjwala. It used to come on DD National, so perhaps that created a larger impact on my mind, and when I graduated I thought that let's give this a try.
If we look back at your childhood, is there any hint that give you that in future you will be in this profession?
I have been a very strong child in the sense that since childhood I never compromised with anybody's rights, not just my rights. Yes, I do come from a broken family, an extremely abusive father, not the paternal family, but just my father, my biological father. There were instances of numerous domestic violence and etc., verbal, physical, etc. So that was perhaps the seed that you need to stand up for your right. And at the age of 11 years, I became 55% partially permanently disabled, though I don't like to use that to my aid. That perhaps guided me into giving various entrance examinations after class 12. Fortunately, unfortunately, I cleared CLAT, got into GNLU, and that's how law happened. It's luck by chance thing, because I never intended to become a lawyer, but here I am a lawyer.
As we know, courtroom is not all about the justice law. Sometimes it's all about the emotion, juggling of human behavior. Is there anything or any moment when you think to give up?
Every day. But at the end of the day, it's the resilience and when I wear the black coat and stand up on the podium every morning from 10 to 4 or whatever the time schedules I have, at that time I'm guided by my duty. For me, the brief that I hold, the faith that my clients repose in, I am standing at the podium representing them, arguing them, pleading on their behalf, just to make the lordships aware or the leaderships aware that they can have a good case. So it's basically duty versus right. So I like to stick towards my duty. The brief is my duty, to represent them is my duty. Morality takes a back seat at that point of time. I am not God. I do not know who is lying, who is not lying. I don't want to travel on that path. For me, my brief is my God and my client, and I want to stick to that.
According to you, who or what is your biggest motivation?
Humans. and their resilience, their stories. Though I come from a family of lawyers, my maternal grandfather was also a lawyer, a criminal lawyer, so as to say. DNA does travel faster and quicker than water. I've never seen him. He is my mother's uncle, my maternal grandfather's elder brother. He was an astonished and a renowned criminal lawyer in Tripura. Everybody knows him. He represented the Tripura royal family. Later on in my life, I have gone to represent the Tripura royal family heirs, the present heirs. So I believe that I can give some credit. My biological father is also a lawyer, though I do not give any credit to him. For people, the kind of relationship that I share with him is extremely strained. Yes, he gave me certain positive notes that you will have to stick to the chamber that you are learning from. There will be moments of despair, there will be moments of crisis, but you need to stick on to it because not every day is same. That advice from my biological father somewhere shaped my journey throughout. Apart from that, it's the humans, their stories, their problems, their aspiration to madam will do it, that she can do it. My clients repose a lot of faith in my work and the way I argue. So that's my biggest inspiration. If I can give them justice, I believe I'm giving justice to society in a perhaps very minuscule way.
In my life, I have seen very few advocates who are humble. I should count you one of those. What is the secret behind that?
I'm an advocate later, I'm a human being first. All human beings are same. We are brought into this world by XYZ, whatever factor, God, human beings, parents, whatever factor. I am an Indian, a Bharatiya. There is a law of the land. The constitution says every human being is equal. Just because I have a professional degree, I might be at a better pedestal for representing the rights of others, but that does not make me a different person. I have a head, a pair of legs and arms, so does other people. What is the differentiating factor? Nothing. When I am in black robes, that is perhaps a differentiating factor in the courtroom. But other than that, we are all humans, we are all equals. I believe the day we start taking our counterpart or all humans as equals, it will be a utopian society and a very good world to live in.
What is the driving force that keeps you moving even on the toughest day?
My duty. Every morning it becomes a kind of task for me to get ready and go to the court, but I believe get up, smell the coffee, get ready, go on the stand, argue your case. It was my duty which is driving me. The clients who have reposed their faith on me, especially in criminal matters, because I deal only in criminal and matrimonial matters. Somebody's brother has died, somebody has been involved in a heinous offense, perhaps due to a lot of circumstances, maybe planted on him by the police authorities, maybe actually the story is something else. It is their duty, it is their faith that they have reposed in me, and it is my duty to represent them. Just that factor helps me to spearhead the matter and represent them.
What is the biggest turning point in your life?
It was about 2-3 years into practice, about 7 years back from now. I was given a case. It was an extradition matter. I will not name the country asking the requesting state asking the extradition. Extradition proceedings are basically those proceedings, I'll just explain in brief, where a crime has been committed by an Indian individual in a foreign land, and they have fled that crime scene and come back to India. Now, since the crime has happened at that jurisdiction, we call it in law extraterritorial jurisdiction. India does not have the power to try that crime because the crime has not happened there. And since the person has come here, the requesting state, say for example X country, the crime has happened there, will ask India to extradite that person, like we've heard in Vijay Mallya. So it's a celebrated case, hence I'm taking the name. So those proceedings are called extradition cases. I was against a first world country. a crime had happened there, and it dealt with narcotic offences, drugs related. So the crime had happened there, the person had fled to India, and after 2-3 years after the requesting state sending the request, and there are other modalities in law, there has to be an agreement with the bilateral agreement with both the countries, India versus that other country, and those are done at the MEA level, and they had asked extradition. So the person was arrested from Mohali. It's a highly reported case by PTI also. While working on the case, I remember that there was a saying back in the time of colonial rule in India, Indians and dogs are not allowed here. That court might have gone, but the way some first world countries still see Indians has not changed. When I went deeper into the matter, I got documents from the requesting state and analyzed those. I saw there were numerous occasions where there were, impartiality being exercised. Jury was not allowed. And a lot of other things. I'm not going into the modalities. When I represented the client, and Delhi has the only court of extradition matters. It's the Patiala House Court which takes jurisdiction, the ACMM court. I did the matter in 2017. I got bail for that client. After 2 years languishing in jail, he got bail. That was the moment which taught me what looks like is perhaps not. Because somewhere down the line, perhaps even today, we have to say, this is our right. And this is how we should demand right. Just by sitting and saying that this is our right will not happen. Sometimes, exercise of utilizing that right is also required.
The way you are explaining everything, I cannot resist myself from asking you the next question. Can you give me some examples of real stories in case of the courtroom?
Yes, I will not name because the matters are sub judice, but I'll definitely like to share a few instances. I did a matter, I'm still doing a matter, it's a murder trial. A 24 years old boy has been murdered mercilessly. Now, it has happened in Delhi. The boy has 4 sisters and a younger brother. He does not have a father, a widowed mother, and comes from the marginalized society. He was brilliant in studies. He completed his education. He was appearing for government examinations. He was waiting his chance. He wanted to join SSC or the police service, something of that sort. Railway examinations was also on the cards, and he was giving private tuitions for these government examinations. The allegations were such that he was giving private tuitions to a lady. She was married. Her husband was an employee at certain place, and the father-in-law of that lady had a medical shop. Now the allegations are such that the deceased person had an affair with the woman, which her husband came to know. Now they hatched a plan to eliminate the young boy from this world, and that successfully happened. It was a night prior to Holi. In northern part of the country we call it Holika Dahan, or the night prior to Holi. So the lady was told by the husband that you call him up, ask him to come at a certain place. The deceased person went, and it was the wives, the alleged students' husbands' friends rented accommodation. So they got him there, beat up the deceased person mercilessly, because the post-mortem showed that apart from ante-mortem injuries, there were injuries like there was spleen breakage, blood in the entire abdomen, and then they took the body after beating him mercilessly. There were instances of beating him with belan chakki, the roll with which you dice the dough for an atta or something, roti basically, and gas pipe. Now gas pipe is technically very hard. It might look like an orange harmless pipe, but technically it's very hard. And there were other things also which were not recovered. He was still alive. He was mercilessly beaten up. He was made to remove his clothes. He was beaten up, and there are videos also to that effect. So these are passion crimes, okay, where for teaching lesson you are killing a person. That's not required. You can tell them, boss, you can go separate ways. But why to kill somebody so much so that the person ultimately succumbs to injuries and dies? So then they took the person in that, demeanor only. The naked body was taken in the main accused car, that is the wife's husband's car. There were blood stains in the car, hair follicles in the car, and he was dumped at a nearby place. From there, the person made 2 calls. He had the phone. One was to somebody, and the other one was to his student. The student rushed with his father, saw the teacher lying there, the deceased person, took him to a government hospital. Ultimately, he died. Now I am representing the deceased person. His younger brother is the complainant. So for them, life is over technically. One brother who was earning, the sole bread earner, and the alleged accused woman, her husband, and 2 other friends, there are 4 accused. They ultimately went down to secure bails because it was the COVID period and a lot of other factors. They came to me at a point after all of them secured bails. So it's very important to have a good lawyer from the very start. Unless you have that, you can explain your rights to the court. Once you miss the bus, you miss the bus. The next bus's destination might be somewhere else. The next bus's destination might be the same, but the journey might be different. Might be the case results in, conviction of all 4, but they will not be languishing in jail, or it will take a lot of time. So it depends on strategy, it depends on a lot of factors. Similarly for other side, here I'm talking about a complainant story. Similarly for other side, with the accused side, now rape. We all know rape is a very heinous offense. It's a derogatory offense. I myself have done matters of CIL regarding the Abhaya or the Tilottama. It's all over the internet. I was the one who took proactive initiative before the Honorable Supreme Court of India, before that CJI Justice Chandrachud, who ordered removal of the deceased photographs and information and name across all social media platforms. Yes, it took me some time for the agencies like MHA, NEA to remove everything from social media, because we live in a digital age right now. It is not possible that we say this and it gets removed. It is a series of execution that is to be done, but I'm thankful that yes, today the deceased victim's rights and dignities are protected. But that's the thing. Now again, other aspect of rape is promise to marry. It might be a relationship which is turned sour. The woman also perhaps knows that marriage, ending of the relationship in a marriage will result in a turmoil and a much worse experience. And perhaps they have both settled the issue and buried it. But how can you, in those moments of, love, passion, and closed doors, you can identify that that was rape and that was not consensual? It's very difficult because I represent numerous clients and I have a lot of landmark judgments in my name from Delhi High Court where I've secured bails in certain situations, because if it is a love setup, the girl had interest in playing a role, the boy also had interest because it's a mutual relationship. How do you identify that that was rape and that wasn't? Perhaps situation was different when the relationship turned sour, but that does not amount to rape. In case a person is not married, then that's okay. But in case both of you have agreed that your paths are different or the situation is not conducive, then how is it rape?
Exactly.
So dealing in human emotions gives us, at least to me, I have the human touch to understand that human emotions are very unique. I might think of a problem in a certain way, my client might not think of that, and another fellow colleague might not think like that. So to each its own, we are all good people. I like to believe that it's a very good world.
I'm so touched that advocate can think like you.
Thank you.
The next thing is that, do you think that is there any connection in between education and the criminal mindset, or it's all about the circumstances, all about the mindset?
No, education does not have any connection. I have seen highly educated people committing grave crimes, not even offenses. Crimes like murder, crimes like deliberate cheating. So it has nothing to do with education, it is to do with the way a human being thinks. It has, because a person from a marginalized society can also be a murderer, a person from a high profile society can also be a murderer, and history has shown, newspapers every day shows us that education has nothing to do with crime. Probably the ratio is higher in marginalized section, but I cannot discount the fact that even educated people are also, some of them are also involved in crime. It has a lot to do with your mindset, with your psychology of how you're able to deal with the situation.
You also deal with matrimonial cases.
Yes.
Can you please give me some examples of those two?
It's very unfortunate when bedroom stories take to the courtroom. I always see this, not just here. I always advocate this on my social media and other ways also. Yes. It is the need of the hour for both parties to come together, sit, mediate, and perhaps take it to a next level. All relationships do not die a natural death. Some relationships need to be truncated for the better of each party. Okay, I need to respect the other party also needs to respect me. It's a mutual thing. So in most of the cases of matrimonial issues, I've seen ego to be the only driving factor. I need to teach the other person a lesson. Similarly for husbands also, I will not give money, I want her to suffer. You have married, it's your child or it's your wife, it's your husband. You should always be open to mutual discussion. I personally believe a relationship should not go so down the drain that there is no point of return. Yes, you might not be staying in the same premises, you might not want to see each other's face. End it gracefully. You entered into the union of marriage in much fanfare. When you exit, end it gracefully. But unfortunately, we don't see that. To each its own, like I always say.
From your experiences, according to you, what do you think about the criminal psychology?
Lust, anger, greed, and immense helplessness at the moment perhaps drives a person to crime. We all know killing, hurting the other person is wrong. Killing is a body offenses. Hurting can be both financial and body offenses. Today, as I speak or as we speak, financial crimes are at a rise. Money being deducted from the credit card, transactions being made, savings account gone blank. It is all by greed, by lust, and immense helplessness. The world is a beautiful place to live, and I believe every person can make their own place if they are hardworking and resilient, not by committing crimes. Crime, for a reason it's called crime, and they're sent to correctional homes or jails. So why to harm the other person? I always ask the person, how would you feel if you are being put in the same position, if you are being harmed or put to injury? And that moment I see, the client's or the person's face going small. That is when I realize it is immense helplessness, desperation, ego and other things, all the vices of a human being, when they accumulate so high that our ego surpasses the levels of Sigmund Freud, that is superego, id ego, that is when a crime takes place or is perpetrated.
Beyond being a lawyer, you are a lovely daughter and a lovely sister. How do you balance in between all the relationships?
We have to, we are humans. And I believe as a person, if you want to give time, if you really feel the love for somebody else, you will definitely carve out time. It's not a hue and cry crisis. Our country's big leaders and executive officers, IAS officers and the cabinet secretary, chief secretary, they also have a family. Yes, supportive family is very necessary. I'm very lucky to have a supportive family. My work schedule is hectic. I leave 8 o'clock in the morning, come back perhaps 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. I drive 100 kilometers daily. I have a supportive family. So if they are showing the love towards me, I should also be in gratitude and take out equivalent amount of time. Maybe perhaps not in equal measures, because love can never be, determined into quantums of bracket. This person has given me this much, I should give back this much. It's always a balance that goes on, and if we really want from within our deepest corners of heart, we will be able to achieve that.
As we come to the end of today's episode, if you could leave a message to our lovely listeners.
Do good. Don't let helplessness, grab you so much that you forget the differences between good and bad. The vices will always be there, but it is upon us for the good to transpire from within us. It's very important to be very graceful, to be very logical, and to stand up to your rights at the right moment. You cannot be sleeping over your rights and be ignorant and say, oh, my destiny. You need to hit the hammer when it's hot. That's all I believe, and the world is a beautiful place. Every people we meet, we imbibe their experience. Every people we meet, we imbibe their experience. We need to learn only the good and not take the, black. It's always a balance. I consider Swami Vivekananda as my karma guru. He has always said, it's not necessary that you offer food or water to a shivling only. You need to love mankind, and I go by that logic always. If I do good to society, the society will give me back, because it's a beautiful place. And I always like to believe, despite being a criminal lawyer, despite coming across human emotions and crime every day, I would always like to say, people, don't let your helplessness overcome you. Be very, very logical.
With this, we come to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much, Advocate Kinnori Ghosh, for give us lots of information, enriched us with the good thoughts. Thank you so much, ma'am.
My pleasure. Thank you.
To our lovely listeners, thank you for being with us, and till the next time, take care of your mental health and stay kind.